Okay, recording has started. Okay, it's 11. I'm going to start right now.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Welcome to the July meeting of DBA Fundamentals Virtual Chapter. Today's presentation will be SSRS 101, Creating Reports, and it'll be presented by Mickey Stuewe. I've got a few things to talk to you about first. First, if you want to go to the next slides, Mickey. Oh, there we go. There's a big date coming up if you're going to go to Summit. That's July the 12th. After that, the price goes up $400. And Summit the past Summit is a fantastic experience. I went for the first time last year and I learned so much. If you do sign up and you're going to go, which if you're going to do it, you better do it before then, because the $150 you would save with our code plus the $400, $550, a lot of you could get a pre-con for the amount of money that you save there. In addition, if you use our code, we're going to give away the money that we normally give away at the end of each session. We're going to draw from a pool of people that use our code, and one person selected from each presentation up until September. So that'll be for $200, and if you're going to go, like I said, you need to do it now. Okay, next. I'm not sure how many virtual chapters we have now, but we've probably got somewhere around 30 or 40, maybe 50. All languages, not all languages, a lot of major languages, just about any topic you can think of. And this education, and most virtual chapters do at least one presentation a month, some one every other month. There should be plenty of stuff out there for you to draw from. Next. Here's some of the examples of ones coming up. Of course, ours, July the 7th. There's data architecture, high availability and disaster recovery, professional development. I try to go listen to at least 2, 3, sometimes 4 a month, because they catch you up on latest trends and topics, different things with the newest versions coming out. Next. And another nicety that PASS has is something called SQL Saturdays. These are mini conferences located in different cities, smaller cities around the United States and the world, where you go on a Saturday. It's totally free. You pay for your lunch, and that's about it. And vendors sponsor and pay for everything, so of course they want you to go by and talk to the vendors a little bit, but there's great sessions from speakers. Mickey is going to be speaking in Louisville in August. Like I said, you can learn a lot from that. Next.
I'm also speaking in Sacramento.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay, good deal. One of the ways to advance your career with SQL and being a DBA is to volunteer. PASS has lots of volunteer opportunities. You can either help with a local SQL Saturday, you can help with a virtual chapter. There's tons of things you can do. Just go to this link and you will be able to go in and see local opportunities, and if you go to your MyPass profile, you can get possible opportunities volunteering at PASS Summit. Next. And this is how you would join PASS. That's not too hard to do. Google PASS SQL and you can get to the main site, and from there you can pretty well do anything you need. Okay, next.
One of the other great things about being on this is you'll get emails when the chapters you're interested in have their meetings, so that helps with reminders.
Oh yes, that helps a lot. Okay. Go on to the next one. This is just showing some of the same stuff that we had earlier.
Oh, we missed, what happened? There was another slide. Oh, we did that.
Yeah.
So that was it. Sorry.
Okay, and I'll go into my normal stuff now. That's the first time I've done it with a slide. So next month, August the 4th, we'll have Gail Shaw present a session called What Execution Plans Can Tell You About Query Performance. And we're having a second session in August because we had the opportunity to get Jess Borland. She'll be presenting Moving from Profiler to Extended Events. And it hasn't been created, this event hasn't been created yet, but we'll have Jonathan Kiss doing a presentation on, I'll think of it in a second. I'll come back to that later. I don't have it written down. I was trying to be extemporaneous. Anyway, let's on to today. We have Mickey Stuewe presenting SSRS 101, Creating Reports. Mickey is a database architect. Her focus is on database modeling, T-SQL optimization. She did a great presentation for us back in October on T-SQL if you want to go back into our archives and look that up. And report design using the SQL Server stack. She's a recent recipient of the Best New Community Voice Tribal Award from Redgate. She blogs regularly and co-authored her first book, SQL Server 2012 Reporting Services Blueprints. She's spoken at Dev Connections, SQL in the City for Redgate, and various SQL Saturday events. She's also president of the Big Pass Community User Group. Our session will be recorded and it will be available usually in a day or so. I'll send out a notification when that happens. That's all for me. Over to you now, Mickey.
Great. Thanks for having me. I am currently speaking in Southern California. I've already had to turn the air conditioner on because it's quite warm. Let's get started. Today we are going to talk about how to build a SSRS report from the ground up. I'm going to be using SQL 2012, but what I'm going to talk about works in 2014 and 2008 and 2008 R2. If you're still in 2005, that was a completely different way of writing reports, and I would encourage you to upgrade if you can. I know anybody stuck in 2005 is probably saying, I'm trying, but maybe show them what can be done with the newer versions, and maybe they'll finally change it for you. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to start at the very beginning with the data sources, talk about how to connect your data sets with parameters. We're going to talk about a few basic layouts using the Tablex and a couple of visual controls. The Tablex is a table. I'm going to talk about why you might want to create some templates to kickstart your report creation. We're then going to deploy our report to Report Server, talk about permissions, and finally set up a subscription for the report. And we're going to do all of this in 51 minutes. If you have a question, go ahead and write it out. At the end of each section, I'll ask if there's any questions, and Steve or Mike will throw one or two questions at me. They can then send me any of the extra questions and I can blog about it. I might not blog about all of them. Last time it took me 2 days of writing to get all the questions, but I'll try and cover the major ones or group them together. So when you are working with reporting services, you set up a couple of things to access your data. The first thing is the data source, and that would be analogous to your ODBC connection. You set it up pointing it to the database. Now the nice thing about setting up data sources in your reports is while you're developing it, you could have a data source called utility, and it points to your local development copy. Then you deploy your report to your development report server, and it's pointing to your development database that everybody uses, your communal database. Then you move your report to the QA, and that data source, still called utility, is pointing to your QA database, and the same with production. So it's a really nice and flexible way without having to go and have a copy of the report for each environment. Data sets are what you use to actually point to your queries. I'm a big fan of using stored procedures in reporting services. They will give you an easy way to modify these stored procedures, the queries, without modifying the report. Also, it allows you to reuse the same execution plan. If you do use inline SQL, which you can do from reporting services, make sure it's parameterized. Don't concatenate in the filters, because you want to make sure that you are getting the best query plan you can and one that's reusable. Now, while you have data sources and data sets, and they can be individual for each report, you also have this concept of shared data sources and data sets. And what that means is you could have a project with 20 reports in it, and they're all using the same data source or the same data set. Why would you have 20 reports use the same data set? Well, what I do is I have a special stored procedure that gets some environment variables that tell me if I'm in development or production, so that I can put a watermark on the back of my report. I also use this special data set to get the logo. Maybe I have it with some other settings that are particular to the server, the reporting server it's deployed to. That can all be put into a data set that's used on all of your reports, and that would be known as a shared data set. So it's a really neat thing to do. When you're naming your data sources and data sets, don't take the default. You don't want it to say data source 1, data source 2. You want to use good names. I usually name the data sources the exact same name as the database they're pointing to. The data sets are named the stored procedures. It makes it a lot easier troubleshooting the problems that you might have to troubleshoot. Filtering is something that you have to think about. SQL Server is good at working with data. Reporting services is good at visualizing data. When you have that in mind, you want to do as much filtering of the data and aggregating the data as you can in SQL Server. You want to do all the visualization techniques in reporting services. Now, that's kind of an overall rule. You also have to think about how the data is worked with. Unfortunately, there are a lot of reports out there that are detail-based. And if you were to show all the details, it might be a 200-page report. That might be needed for compliance issues or for an auditor to come in and look at something. So when you're thinking of your report, if 90% of the time they're looking at all the data and only 10% of the time they're filtering, then maybe that's a good time to filter in the reporting services side. If 90% of the time they're looking at one customer's data, which is 10 rows as opposed to 1,000 rows, and 10% of the time they're looking at all the data, then make sure that the filter resides on SQL Server and is only pushing over that 1,000 records for 90% of the time, or sorry, 100 records, and then 1,000 records for that 10% of the time. So it's something you really want to think about. And you can control all of that with the parameters and the way you write your stored procedure. I group data sets into two categories. The data that you're actually displaying. For instance, today we're going to display diagnostic data about our report server. There's also data sets that represent parameter lists. For instance, we're going to create a list of database names for the user to choose from so that they can filter the diagnostic data down to a particular database. Now, we're not going to display this list of databases, but we're going to show it in the parameters. So that's a different kind of data set. Any questions yet? Also known as a coffee break for me. Okay, so these are some best practices when talking about those. In my opinion, use a stored procedure whenever it's possible. It just really helps consolidate the data. Only bring over the data that you really need. Use consistent naming. There is a limitation to reporting services. One store procedure can only return one data set. You can't have it return all 5 of them. The good news is you can have as many data sets as you want, but they have to be independent queries. Use shared data sources when possible. That makes it much easier when you need to change the location of the data sources, because it'll exist only one time or only in the locations you specify on your report server. So let's get in there. We haven't even seen the application yet. Now, this is Visual Studio. Do I have it full screen? There, now it's full screen. It is called, oh, I always forget. I'll have to think of the name later. They changed the name. In 2008 and 2008 R2, it was called BIDS. Then they changed it. Let's see if I can find the name here. SQL Server Data Tools. So a lot of people call it SSDT. What it is it's SQL Server's components plugged into Visual Studio. So in SSDT, you get to create SSIS packages, SSAS cubes, and SSRS reports. So you don't have to buy Visual Studio. You can get the SQL Server data tools. So it will look like Visual Studio, but you would only have access to that. You have to get the Visual Studio components in order to write the .NET code. But they can coexist in the same application as well. So what I did is I created a brand new project. All I did was I did File, New, Project, and I selected Report Server Project. Down here it tells me my location and the solution, so it's just like creating a .NET application. There are lots of wizards. I don't use them. It's just easier for me to go and do it manually, and that's the way that I will show you today. When you create your empty project, you have 3 folders, one for the shared data sources, one for the shared data sets, and one for the reports. When you create the reports, you'll be able to link these shared data sources and data sets to your reports. So let's add a shared data source. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk briefly about some templates, but I'll show you how to create them later in the presentation. Now I mentioned earlier that I have a shared data set that I use for my reports. And that shared data set has a shared data source. So if I right-click on Shared Data Sources and hit Add New Item, I can come in here and I can see all the templates that are available. This one without a logo called Utility is a data source. I wish it would say that it was a data source, but it doesn't. I know it's a data source because I created it as a template. I want it to be called Utility, not Utility 1. So I remove the 1, and when I hit Add, it's going to add it. It also opens the code, which is XML, but we don't need to see that, so we're going to close that. Now if I double-click on it, it'll open up the property window, and I can see that it is pointing to the utility catalog on my SQL Demo Monkey server, and I've named it Utility. I'm now going to do the same thing for shared data sets. Add, New Item, and it's called Get Report Standards. I have another presentation that I talk about this that I have a link to at the end of the presentation. And it's recorded so you can go see it. Again, it shows the XML, so I'm going to close the window and then double click on the link. And here it shows that the data source is Utility, and that's connected to a store procedure called Get Report Standards. So now I have the shared data sources and shared data sets. Do I have to use these? No. I can embed them directly into the report. So let's add a report. I'm going to add. If I use Add New Report, it's going to take me through the wizard, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to do Add, New Item, excuse me, and I have some templates already set up. I created a landscape orientation template and a portrait orientation template. That is so that my header and footer are all laid out for me. It's been sized, the properties have been set, and I'm ready to go. So we're going to select Template Portrait, and we're going to call this Database Diagnostics. Hit Add, and here's my canvas. And because I based it on the template, I've got a place for my title, my logo, I have a color palette, and a footer. If I want a blank report, I can do Reports, Add New Item, and select Report from the templates. And we'll just call this blank. Blank, if I can spell. Add, and this is what a blank surface looks like. So I have a template, and now I want to start connecting. Oh, let's look over here on the left. On the left, I have the report data window. For some reason, I lose this window a lot. So when you need to retrieve this window, it's located under the View menu, Report Data. If you don't see it at the bottom, click on the canvas or this yellow area and then go back to the the View Report Data. Sometimes it's not in the list based on what you've clicked on. The report data tells you all the components that you have on your report. It will list your parameters. Right now we don't have any. It will list any embedded images. I have one called Draft, which is a watermark I use. I've turned it off so you won't see it in this presentation though. I have data sources and I have data sets. If you notice, there is this little arrow pointing right here. Oops, the one I just crossed out. Let's try that. That is signifying that, excuse me, that I'm using a shared data source and a shared data set, which are tied directly to the two in the project. If it doesn't have that logo, then, or that icon, then you are using an embedded data source or data set. We will show some embedded data sets in a minute. Underneath my data set, I can see all of the fields. So if I also click on the data set, I can see here that is a shared data set with the little option button. Under fields, I can see the full list of fields. So let's create a new data source. We're going to create one pointed to the utility DBA database. If you aren't familiar with the concept of utility DBA, I strongly suggest that you look up Chris Shaw. He has a blog post and probably a presentation somewhere on the internet about the use of a utility database for the DBA. This is where you can store any of your stored procedures that you might need. I happen to use Ola Hollengren's scripts for maintaining my indexes, and so I store those in my utility DBA database. For us, we're going to be looking at some stored procedures that are doing some diagnostics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the data source. I'm going to right-click and hit Add Data Source. It's going to ask me, is this an embedded connection, which means it exists only for this report, or is it a shared data source? We're going to create a new one, so I'm going to click Edit for the connection string. I'm going to type in SQL Demo Monkey, and I'm going to select the utility DBA database. I can test my connection. Great. Now, right now I'm using Windows Authentication, which is perfect for developing on your server. It means you don't have to worry about any access. But when you do want to deploy it, not everybody uses Windows Authentication to access the stored procedures for reports. And I have some slides on permissions, so we'll talk about it then. Right now I'm going to go ahead and use a SQL Server user. I call it SSRS user and my password, and I want to save it. I'm going to hit OK and hit OK. And now, oh, I forgot to name it, so I'm going to double click it. I'm going to grab the database name, and now it's named. And you can see that there's no icon with the arrow, so this is an embedded data source. Now I want to create some data sets, but before I do, I'm going to show you the queries because we're all database people and we like to see the queries. In my utility DBA, I have some stored procedures here, and they are all based on Glenn Berry's diagnostic queries. He gave me permission to use them in this presentation, which I was very thankful for. If you are not familiar with them, Google Glenn Berry diagnostic queries. He has them per SQL Server version. So you have to grab the 2008 queries if you're using 2008 and the 2014 queries if you're using 2014. The reason for that is he tries and leverage all of the DNVs and other components that are specific to that version. This script has, I'll go all the way down to the bottom, 69 queries, and there is 1,243 rows in here. And it will give you a plethora of information about your report server and your databases. I love this thing. I'm always using it when I need to find out some information about my system. We are going to talk about some specific two queries specifically. One is for VLFs. If you aren't familiar with VLFs, this is telling you how many sections your transaction log is broken into, and you don't want too many of them. While Glenn has this query in his diagnostic set, it is based off of a query that Michelle Uford created. She is a DBA at GoDaddy. At the end of each of his queries, he puts some comments to help you understand what you're looking at when you're looking at the diagnostic queries. So what he's telling us is that we want to make sure that our VLFs are under 200 in most cases. Okay, that's great, and we'll use that information later. This is what the data will look like when I execute it. We've got all our database names and our VLFs. Notice I don't have this sorted in any specific way. The reason for that is for most of the data sets we use in reporting services, we want to allow reporting services to do the sorting. It will be consistent that way, because once we start doing aggregations or maybe providing sorting to our user, we want the sort order we used in SQL Server will not be beneficial anymore. And sorting is expensive in SQL Server. So we want to save that for reports. The other one that we will be looking at is called file information for our reports. This is going to show us where the MDF and LDFs are actually stored for each database. Okay, so let's bring those data sets in. Oh, one other thing, this one has a parameter, database ID. This will allow me to say I want a specific database, which I don't. I have the IDs here. So we'll have to resolve that in our report. On the data sets in the report data window, I'm going to right click and hit add data set. I'm going to use a I'm not going to use a shared data set, so I want to embed it. But I am going to use the data source that's existing already, so I'm going to select Utility DBA. Now, quite often, I'm so excited to get my data sets that I forget to create the data source. No problem. You click New, and it takes you to the window that creates the data source, and it automatically adds it to your report, so you don't have to click out of here to do that step. So let's select Utility DBA. If I was going to do an inline SQL statement, I can write that here, but we're going to use stored procedure, and you don't have to memorize it because it'll give you the list. Unless you have 600, then you might need to know. So we're going to bring in the VLF counts, and we're going to hit OK. Oops, and I got to go back in because, as usual, I forgot to name it. Now I can't have my schema name, so I'm going to just put the stored procedure name. If you change the underlying stored procedure, you want to come back in this window and click Refresh Fields, and it'll go back and query what fields the stored procedure is going to return and fix your report. So go ahead and hit OK. And now we have the Get VLF Counts with database name and VLF count columns. I'm going to do it one more time. Add data set. I'm going to use an embedded data set for utility DBA, and we're going to bring in the database file information stored procedure. And I'm going to hit OK. Great. Now this stored procedure had a parameter. So now when we come up to parameters, we see we have a parameter called database ID. If I run this, it's going to show me the database ID at the top as a filter. Now, how many of you memorize your database IDs? I hope no one raised your hand. If you do, you need a vacation. I don't either. So I actually want to have a nice drop-down list of database names. So let's see how we can do that. I want my user to be able to see all the databases or one database name in this report. So what I have is I created a stored procedure called database list. Now let's take a look at it as if I was creating it for the first time. Here I queried the sys databases table, and it gave me the list of database names as well as their IDs. Now this is only the individual names. I want the user to be able to select all of them as well. So I'm going to union a statement here, union all, and I'm going to add a fake row, database ID -1, and it will say all. And they will select this when we want them to use all of the databases. Now the problem is it's at the very end. I could sort on database name, but what if I have a database called Abacus? That's going to come before all. So I want all to be at the top, and then I want the other database names sorted. So I'm going to add a column, and I want the databases to be sorted second, so I'll put a 2, and I'm going to call this sort order. And I want this one sorted first, so I'm going to say 1. Now, a few minutes ago, I told you that you want the report to do the sorting. That is not true for parameter lists that you're going to use. Those you need to sort here. So I'm going to do order by, sort order, and database name. So now I get all at the top, and all the other databases are sorted. And this is going to come along for fun. We're not going to use it. So I have that stored procedure all set up, so let's bring that in. Add a data set. I'm going to bring in another embedded data stored procedure, database lists. And now we have our 4 data sets. One is shared. We have a parameter and 2 data sources. Any questions yet?
Yes, I kind of missed the last one. Was muted and, when you first asked for questions.
Oh.
Most of the questions have to do with, and this is a little older, they want to know about any new things in 2016 that you know of, SSRS. What version of Visual Studio are you using? And SSDT versus Visual Studios, and SSDT versus Report Builder.
Okay. I don't know what's new in 2016. I haven't done that investigation yet. I'm 3 months into a new job, and it is very, very busy. So I need to spend some time pulling that down and looking at it. For the version, let's see, I'm using the Visual Studio and SQL Server. They kind of get out of sync, so you're not using the same year of Visual Studio that you're using of SQL Server. So the SSDT, the SQL Server Data Tools, that will be the same version as the version of Reporting Services and SQL Server that you're using. So for me, I'm using 2012. But everything I'm showing you works in 2008 and 2014. 2014 looks the same as this. 2008, the icons are a little different. The report server, which is in the web browser, that looks a little different in 2008, but not 2014. I use 2014 at work. I just haven't upgraded my VMs for demoing on them. This particular Visual Studio is 2010 shell. So that's which one I'm using there. And I think that's it. Report Builder. I have never used Report Builder. I've been in there once. I was already a power reporting expert, I guess you could say, before Report Builder was introduced, so it never had a benefit for me. Report Builder is great for the people that for the business users who are power users. They don't know SQL really, but you want to build components for them. You want them to quickly throw together a report. So this presentation doesn't cover Report Builder. I'm actually showing you how to do it from scratch. Any other questions?
That was the bulk of it. There's one question here about performance. And this makes sense. Is it a good idea to have SSRS running on its own server instead of the database server because it's CPU intensive? That's probably true. Yeah.
And you want to give it a lot of memory because it's building reports, and you have a lot of people hitting reports. I had one sales manager who ran the same report like 1,000 times in a day, even though the data was only changing once a day. I giggled every time I saw the metrics on that. And you can, we don't cover the metrics in here, but you can get the metrics on the reports that are ran, which is wonderful when you need to go talk to that person who insists they use this one old report you want to get rid of. And they said, but I use it all the time. And you can go look at the metrics and say, you used it once last month. Can we get rid of it? Or at least put it aside or for now. So, okay, back to the regularly scheduled broadcast. Let's see, here we go. We talked about that. Filtering data through parameters. Okay, I kind of classify parameters into 3 different groups. You have the parameters that are tied directly to your data set, like we saw database ID. That is tied directly to that query. The report will not run if it isn't satisfied with a value. And that value could be null, but you do need to work with it. You can also create additional parameters. You can create parameters that help, in addition, filter your data set. This would be an example of maybe you have a stored procedure that requires a city. But there are a lot of cities in the world, so you don't want to provide all of the cities. So you might have a parameter that filters your parameters. This is called cascading parameters. So you might have a filter, start with a parameter that filters by country, then by state, then by county, and then by city. And then finally, that city parameter is passed to the stored procedure. Cascading parameters are wonderful. They can slow your reports down if the queries that are providing the values for the parameter are intensive. And there's some workarounds on that. I don't cover that in here. That's more of an advanced topic. I might have covered it in my past presentation last year. Contact me afterwards if you need to use that. The other one, the third type, is an internal parameter. This is a parameter that the user may or may not see. It can be used to affect the way the layout is. Maybe you want to group the data and have the groups collapsed most of the time, but you have one user who wants them always opened when they work with the report. So you could have a parameter that says whether to collapse the groups or not when they generate the report. You might also have it do some other things. That is something that I do cover in other classes. For the reports, you can set them up to have available values. For our database ID, we're going to set it up to see a list of database names. You can also say it starts with a particular value. Maybe we always want it to start with the value all. If you do not select a default value, it will either be blank or it will say select a value or something. We'll see that before we select the default value. And creating an internal parameter, that would be a parameter that the users never see. That would be something that is useful to you. Maybe you're going to deploy it a couple different ways and you want to parameterize those changes. So let's set up a parameter here. Now database ID, if I double click on this, it'll come in here and it'll show us the name, which can't have spaces, and it'll show us the prompt, which is what the user will see, and that can. It will have the various data types, and it'll allow us to select whether it's visible, hidden, or internal. Visible means the user can see it. Hidden means the user cannot see it, but it will be available to you when you deploy it to the report server. Internal means it's only available during design mode. It is not available to the user or available when you deploy it to the report server. Available values, you can either specify a list. This would be hard coding your values. I don't recommend that unless it's maybe female and male or something else that you know never changes, or it's a one-time report. You can also have it come from a query, which is what we're going to do. We're going to set this one up to come from the database list. The value is what will be returned when the user selects a value in the parameter. The label is what they see. So we want them to return the database ID, but we want them to see the database name. The default values, we're going to specify a value, and we're going to specify -1. So that way it says select all. Oh, but I said I would show you what it would look like if we don't select a value. So let's do that. When I hit OK and we preview it, it says select a value, and here is the list of databases. Now this says database ID, but we're seeing database names. So let's change that up and change it to say select all. We're going to change the prompt to say database name, and the default value will be -1, and hit OK. So now when we look at the parameter, it said all. Because all of the parameters are set, in this case there's one parameter, it executed it with that value. So that would be another reason not to select a value if you don't want it to execute right away. There's advantages to not having it execute right away. The user doesn't understand what's going on when they run the report. So if it takes a long time, then they'll not like the report. If the parameters take a long time to populate, you don't want all of the parameters to, I said that wrong. Say if it took a long time to get this list of database names, then I don't want to have a default value because it's going to take a while. It'll show the users the names and they can select a value, and then it'll take a little while to go back, get the data, and render the report. So it breaks it up for them. I hope that made better sense. So now we have our parameter all set up. It's passing the value to the get database file information data set, which we haven't seen. Let's go back to my slides. Keep the parameters in logical order. Let me show you how to do that. I used to have to go into the XML because a report is just XML data and change them. You no longer have to do that. Let's create a new parameter manually so that we can see how to change the order the parameters are displayed. We want to create a parameter that will show us the threshold of what VLF counts we want to see. So I'm going to add a parameter, and this one is going to be called VLF threshold. and the prompt will be VLF threshold. The text, this is an integer, and it's going to start with, or the default value will be 0 because we want anything over 0. So say I wanted the VLF threshold first. I can select it, and up here at the top are arrows that will change them back and forth. I don't think the original 2008 version had that. If not, I sure didn't see it for a couple of years. So I used to manually go in and modify the XML documents. So this is very important. Sometimes, and I don't know why, the order of the parameters will change, and you want them to be in the order you're expecting, so that when you preview the report, they come in the order that you want. And this is not the order I want. I want database name first. So sometimes you have to go in and change them. You cannot change it on the report server. You can only change it here. All right, so let's go back to my slides and look at those other best practices. We talked about filtering, list parameter values at the top of the report. I didn't talk about that. What you want to do is when you render the report, what I do is right here at the top of my report, I actually will put all of the values that were selected up here. So we will create a threshold. I'm going to move my color palette, which we'll talk about in a minute. I'm going to go to my toolbox. I'm going to add a text box here. And right now it's just going to be a label, so it's going to say VLF threshold. And I'm going to resize it. I have some tools up here just like I would in Word, and I'm going to left align it. Now if I make it too small, the text box will automatically grow, so it won't cut the text box off when I display it. I'm also going to bring over my parameter, which is VLF threshold, and I can click and drag and drop it right on the palette. And we're going to line this puppy up like that. And it's a number, so I'm going to shrink that up. So now when I preview it, I can see the threshold is set to 0 or it's set to 200. Why is that important? When they bring you a physical copy of the report and they say it's not working, I'm not getting the data I want, you can look at the parameters listed and say, oh, that's because you picked a date range in the future. There's no data yet. I've had that happen. So it's a good thing. It's also great when they print the reports and leave it on someone's desk, and then they come back, why the numbers changed? Well, I can see down here that you printed it on the 7th. That was 2 weeks ago, and the data has changed, as well as these are the parameters you selected, and that's not the data you're looking for. Ha! Sorry, that was a Star Wars joke, and I just made myself laugh. Ignore me. Well, don't ignore me because I'm presenting.
I liked it.
Sorry, I needed some coffee. You'll ignore me? Okay. Okay. So now we have parameters and possible lists. Okay, we talked about that. So let's talk about the toolbox. We have several tools in our toolbox. These are the ones that come with the SSDT, and let's bring them up here. These three right here are why you want to move away from 2005 reporting services if that's where you are stuck, and I am sorry if you are. These are all three of these are the same control. You can think of these as three different templates of the same control, and I have an entire presentation available through Pragmatic Works on just these three controls. They are called the Tablex. So when you draw them on your canvas, it will not say it's the table control, matrix control, list control. It will say it's the Tablex control. The table is just like a regular table, like an Excel spreadsheet. The matrix control has some preset grouping mechanisms set up, and the list control behaves kind of like the an access form would. You can put as many controls in a single cell, and they'll repeat for every detail row. You can turn each of these templates into the other. You can start with the list control and end up with the table control. You can start with the table control and end up with the list control. We are only going to talk about the table control today. I'm also going to show or demonstrate, sorry, wrong button. And I did the same button. The data bar and the sparkline, we're going to show how to, not sparkline, the data bar and the indicator. I'm going to show you those. After my presentation, if people want to stick around, we're going to show the chart control because I am going to be running over today. So let's put some data on this form. We're going to pull, I'm going to click on the table control and just click on my canvas, and it automatically drops it. If I select the table and draw it out, it's going to make it the size that I want. Control Z is your friend. You mess up, Control Z on your all the way out to where you didn't mess up. I use it all the time. When you first draw the table control on here, it doesn't have a data set tied to it. You need to tie it to it. And there's a couple ways to do that. The first way is to select the Tablex and then click on this square up here. That will get you the little tiny white boxes and allow you to move it. If you right click on it, it'll give you the drop down list where you can go to Tablex properties. You'll also have your property window, which F4 brings up, and you can do a lot of work in here as well. So let's go to Tablex properties, and we're going to select the data set name, and we're going to start with get VLF counts and hit OK. Now you can, when you click on the cell, which holds a text box, you can see this little table looking thing that will give you the list of fields. I'm going to select database name. The other way would be to be in your report data, go to the data set you want and click and drag and drop it directly into the cell. Now when I view the report, I have all of the database names and all of the VLF counts, and it's very messy looking. It's not very pretty. So let's make it pretty. When you select the columns, you can select a cell and then move the columns to change the size. They will grow down, they do not grow to the right or left. Now this is where my color palette comes in, and I'll talk about this later. This is a table that I've changed all the colors. If I want, let's select this color. I want to go to my properties window, the background color, and now I have my hexadecimal color. I can then select an entire row and change this. That's all the purpose of that color palette is. When I'm done designing my report, I'll delete the table and the color palette will go away. The other thing we wanted to do was sort. So I'm going to right click on that square again, go back to Tablex properties, and go to sorting. I want the VLF counts to be sorted in descending order and then the database names in case there are VLF counts that are the same. I'm going to add 2. I'm going to select VLF count first and do Z to A for descending, and then database name A to Z. So now when I preview the report, I have them, our highest VLF counts, and I have them sorted alphabetically, which you can see down here at the bottom. I'm not a big fan of these lines. If you select the whole table and go to properties and change the border style to none, it's only going to affect the outer lines. You need to select each row if you want to change the border style. I'm going to change this to none, and it is case sensitive if you're typing directly in the window, but I do want a single line on the bottom between each row. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to change this one as well. So now we can see each of them. Now when I change this to AdventureWorks and I hit View Report, it doesn't do anything. Why is that? This particular data set did not have a parameter. Maybe it was too difficult. Maybe 90% of the time they're using all and only 10% of the time they're selecting a specific one. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie this to this data set in the report. I also want to tie my threshold to the VLF count. We are going to do that on the Tablex. So I'm going to right-click, Tablex Properties, and there's Filters. That will only affect this particular table. If I want it to be used for all uses of this data set, I would go to the Data Set Properties and use the filters here. Either one. You just need to keep track of which one you're using. We're going to go ahead and do it here in case we have time to do the chart later. So I'm going to tie the database name. Now remember we have the all, so when we have all, we want all the names, otherwise we only want the selected name and the parameter. So we're actually going to need a function. This is an expression builder. You can double click on things down in these two windows or to pop up here. We're going to use an if statement. We're going to say if the parameter is -1, so if the value of the parameter is -1, then we want all of them to be displayed, in which case we're going to go and select the fields database name. So this will say database name equals database name. Otherwise, we want to only select the parameter value. Now, the value is numeric, but this particular query doesn't have the numeric value, so we want the label, which is actually the name. So there's a difference between the value of the parameter and the label of the parameter. When we hit OK, we have that one all set up. We're also going to add the threshold. This one, we can use the parameter directly, so we want to show anything that is greater or equal than the parameter. So we're going to go back into the expression builder and select the VLF threshold. I double-clicked to get it to appear up at the top. You can use this shorthand notation once you get used to working with the product. When I preview it, I can select AW Monkey, and it will only show me AW Monkey. I can also say all and show me everything over 200. And now I've got only the 2 rows showing. Yay! All right, let's see what else we can do in here. I want to show a visual cue for the VLF. So let's go back to our toolbox, and I'm going to drop a data bar into the cell. I'm going to want a horizontal bar, and I want to tie it to the VLF count. Now, one of the things with the Tablex product, the cell always contains something else. The cell, is never empty. This cell contains a text box. This cell now contains a chart, specifically the data bar chart. So when I click on it, I can go ahead and add the value of VLF count, and it's all set up. Woohoo! That is the easiest chart control you'll find. And there you go. You've got them all based on how much data is in that VLF count. Well, what if that's not the proper control? Maybe you want another visual control that will show you you are getting too high of a VLF count, and now you've passed the 200 mark as well. That will be the indicator control. So we're going to drop this. No, I don't want to drop it there. I'm going to right-click on my table, insert column to the right. Now I'm going to drop the indicator into the column. And it has all these predefined images. I can select other images as well. I'm going to select this set of shapes and hit OK. I'm going to right-click on it and go to indicator properties. We are going to go to the value and states. The value is based on the VLF count. I'm not doing it based on percentages. I'm doing it based on the actual numeric value. I want red to be anything over 200. Hopefully we don't hit 1,000. Yellow is going to be 100 to 200. And then green is 0 to 100. And I hit OK. I preview it. And I can see I have the red indicator for the top two and green for all the ones below it. Any questions yet?
Mickey, there's a lot of questions, but
Yes.
we may not have time for every one of them. We'd be here till 2:30. But there's an overriding theme that people are concerned about the security involved in keying in user IDs and passwords when you go across to multiple different servers. There's a lot of questions related to that. If you could address that at some point, that would be good.
Yes. I have a slide on that. Why don't we, let me see, let me go to that slide since we're at the hour, and then we'll come back to finish building the presentation.
That'd be good. Catch them before they leave.
Yeah. Deploying, here we go. Permissions. Okay, this is kind of the layout. There's really two different sets of permissions that you're working with when you're working with reports. You have your standard database side of permissions, and then you have the permissions that you set up in reporting services. So when you're working with the database permissions, one of the things that I've started to do is I've created a schema. I created it called report, and all my store procedures that the reports use will be in that schema. I then grant execute permissions to that schema, and I use a SQL Server user, I called it SSRS user, and I can change that password in the report server. So I don't have to give that password to my developer. And it can be different for each server because they're calling the data source. And the data source is set up in the report server. Now, that is generic, yes. What I do, and then the data sources exist on the report server. Now, and the reports access those data sources like we've seen. But now here is where it's really coming from the other direction. Mickey and Dan are DBAs, and Lucy is a salesperson. She's my dog, by the way. What we want to do is we want to limit access. So I created some AD groups. One is called DBAs, and Mickey and Dan belong to it, and another one is called Sales, and Lucy belongs to it. These groups have access to each of the folders. I have a DBA folder for my DBA reports, and I have another folder for my sales reports. Lucy can only access the reports that are in this folder, and Dan and Mickey can only access the reports in this folder. Now I can add Mickey and Dan to this user group since they're the DBAs and they could have access to everything. The reports will then inherit the permissions from the folder. You can then unlink that and put additional restrictions for particular reports. Maybe this other report is only accessible by Mickey. Then that report could have additional permissions. So even though I generalized my report user on the database side, I added the permissions that restricted the user accessing the report from the report server side. So that's a two-pronged approach. You could use the same AD groups on the store procedure side, but now you're going to be managing permissions from two ends, and that can, when you get a large catalog, of reports, and I took a poll in my past class last year, and someone was managing 2,000 reports. It makes it really nice to have a simple approach on the database side and the more complex approach on the report server side. So this is kind of how I lay it out. There are multiple ways of doing it after that. And you can have the data sources use Windows authentication. You can have different users. There's several different ways of accessing the reports or the data. Does that help? Hopefully, I'm sorry, I asked that like anybody could answer me. You could send me additional questions on the topic as well. Create standards. No matter what pattern you use for dealing with permissions, be consistent with it. Make a standards and use that for all your reports. It will make it easier to manage in the long run. And leverage Active Directory groups. That will also make it easier when you onboard somebody, you add them to the AD group, and now they have access to all the reports that they need to have access to. Okay, let's go back to where we were. Sorry, they don't have an easier way of getting back here. We're on creating a layout. Okay, so let's add our other data set. We created a report, and we have one data set on here. One of the beautiful things is you can put as many data sets on here as you need. I can't remember the last time I used a sub-report. I just bring in my data sets and I add additional tablexes. So we're going to add a new table here, and this is going to have our second data set. I am going to show you a second way of connecting it to the data set. I'm going to click directly on this little table, and the first thing it does is it shows me the data sources because it hasn't been connected yet. So utility DBA, get database information, and I'm going to show the database name in this first column. I am also going to click and add file ID, file name. Now I can go ahead and drag additional ones. Let's do physical name, and it's going to append it right at the end, which is really nice and fast. What if I go beyond the end of my palette? Well, one, it's making it grow, but the paper won't grow automatically. What it'll do is it'll print these 3 columns on a second page. If you find you have a very long table like this, do not extend your header or footer to the end of the canvas because you'll never see it. The headers and footers are bound really by the page size, and they'll automatically print to the second page, so you don't have to do any extra work for the headers and footers. We can go ahead and preview this, and down here we can see that extra data, and when I filter it, it's going to shrink it all up, and we see only the AdventureWorks data. Now for this one, we see that AdventureWorks, the database name is repeated because we have multiple physical files. We have our MDF and our LDF. So let's see how we can group that. On the Tablex, you have the 3 little dashes. That indicates a detail row. It will show every row in the data set. If I right-click, I can add a group, a parent group, and we want to group by database name. I also wanted to automatically add an extra row in the Tablex to show my header. Boom, we have it. Now, I don't like this column. It's got these little dashes right here. I don't like it because I can't merge cells. So I'm going to delete this column and make my own. Delete column. I'm going to empty this one out because I want the database name to be on the row above it, and I don't need the header anymore. So I'm going to add database name here, I'm going to select several cells by using my Shift key. I'm going to right-click and merge the cells. And then I'm going to shrink this first column up so that it's just an indentation. You can see this big, large parenthesis. It's indicating that that's a group. If you had multiple groups, you would see multiple parentheses here. Now when I preview, let's increase this physical name because that was a pretty big column. Now when I preview it, I can see that my database name is on each group. And let's colorize it so that I deleted a label. Let's colorize it so that it looks easier to detect. I'm going to select the headers and I'm going to make them this color. And pick another color. So now when you look at them, it's easier to read. Yay! And when we filter the data. Great. All right. So now what else do we need to do? The templates. I'm going to skip this side. Basically what you do is you create a report the way you want and then you save it to this folder. And I'll give this presentation to Steve so that you can get it. And when you save the report to this folder, it becomes a template. Okay. Let's keep going. Now, project properties. This helps determine how you can deploy from Visual Studio. In the toolbar, you'll see the word debug. That's telling you that you are in the debug configuration. When you go to the project properties, you'll match it to the configuration to get the settings. When you change this configuration here in your toolbar, it will use the configuration settings you set up here. Maybe you have one set of configuration for development and a different set of configuration for production, for deploying. The different target folders will tell you where it's going to deploy the various components. This target report part folder is for report parts, which you can create but are only used in Report Builder, so we're not going to cover it in here. I'm going to put all my data sets in the data set, all my shared data sets will go in the data sets folder, all my data sources will go in the data sources folder. I lost my mouse. I can put in my target URL, which is localhost or SQL Demo Monkey in my case. And so let's go set up all of these values in our report because this was a brand new project. This is a project level properties. So under project, DBAFundamentals properties, because that's the name of my project. I'm on my debug. I'm going to set my target path, SQL Demo Monkey /report server. I don't like spaces in my data sources, so I'm going to take that out and here as well. Now I've brought my target report folder DBAFundamentals, but I actually have a folder already out there that I want it to deploy to, SSRS 101, so I'm going to deploy it to that. Normally I would have each project be per department, so this project would have actually been called IT and the target folder would have been IT as well. Now when I'm going to get rid of this blank one, so I can hit delete and it will delete it, or I can click on exclude from project, which will leave it on my file system but exclude it from this project. When I deploy everything, it's going to deploy utility DBA. It's going to deploy the get report standards and this report. Now, I have other projects that I've deployed. So utility and get report standards actually exist already. So when we deploy this, it's going to tell me it didn't actually deploy it. So let's go ahead and right-click on the project and hit deploy. Down in the output, it tells you what it's going to deploy. Is this still going? It's still going. It hasn't had its coffee yet. Oh, that's not good. I was being impatient and clicking on things. Down here, while we're waiting, it said that it skipped the utility, data source, the get reports, data set, and it skipped the data source diagnostics. It's not skipping deploying, it's skipping the building of them because we haven't changed it since the last time we previewed it. There we go. So now we can see that it wants to deploy everything. It's telling us it can't deploy utility because it exists already. The same with get report standards, but it did deploy the diagnostics report. So let's go to the report server. This is the home page. If you're in 2008, it looks a little different, mostly the tonal qualities of the colors. The part that is different is when you hover over the report, you won't have this drop-down menu. The easiest way in 2008 R2 is to click on Details View. And then you can start going in and looking at all the folders. What I have here is the data sets folder that we talked about, the data sources folder, and the SSRS 101 folder. When I go into data sources, I can see my various data sources. Here's the utility one. When I click on it, it shows me the information. And I have my SSRS user. These are the various credentials. You can have them type in password each time. You can have it select the user, or save the credentials. You can use Windows Integrated Security, or you can say that anybody has access to it and credentials aren't required. Always, always, always hit apply. Whenever you see an apply or OK button, click it when you've made changes. Don't go to the next screen first. The changes won't be saved. That's true for all versions. So let's go back to SSRS 101, and here we see we have the database diagnostics report. When I click on it, it will run the report. Since we had values already set, it's running, and we have our report. Yay! And now I can select one particular one, and it will show us a single one. Now, what if I wanted to deploy this manually? I've deployed it through the product. Maybe you aren't allowed to deploy to production through SSDT. One of my companies, I couldn't do that. If you want to do that, you use Upload File. You select the RDL, and where we are in Demos. This guy and our diagnostic one. Since I already have one called that, we're going to call this one manual. And if you wanted to override an existing one with that same name, you would collect override item if exists and hit OK. Now the difference here, on the one we deployed through Visual Studio, it was automatically connected to data sources and data sets. This one doesn't know where they exist, so it gives you an error. So you're going to pull down the drop-down menu and select Manage. You're going to go to Data Sources, and you're going to link them manually. We're going to click Browse, go to the Data Sources folder, click Utility, hit OK. We're going to do the same thing for Utility DBA. Okay, this one, it used I didn't create a shared data source, it was an embedded one, so it embedded it in here. Which is a good example of how an embedded data source would work. I never use them, I always use shared ones. Since this one has credentials supplied by the user running the report, that's not what I want. I can go ahead and change this and put my SSRS user here. and my password, and hit test connection. Connection created successful. You don't have test connection in 2008. And hit apply. Now we're going to go up to shared data sets and point to the shared data set on this one as well. Hit OK and hit apply. Now when I run the report, it's all connected. I'm going to keep going, and then we can take any questions at the end. So deploying the report, you can also deploy it through command line. That one you could Google. What else can you do? Create SSRS projects per department. I talked about that. We talked about project, set up the project properties. You can create one for development, QA, and production. I use release numbers on the bottom of my reports. You can tie them either to an Excel workbook where you keep keeping a report catalog. I've maintained my report catalog in Team Foundation server. Basically, it's a way for you to reference your reports. I also include version numbers so that I know the latest version is being used in production. And those are all manually generated. There isn't a standard way to do that. Now we talked about permissions. Let's actually see where you set those up in the report. When I go back to the folder, there's two ways of doing it. We're going to set the folder permissions. So I'm going to go to folder settings and security. They're not called permissions in here, they're called security. Right now I have some individual with permissions, but I'm going to do one for the DBAs. So I'm going to do new role assignment. The group name, this is my user or my group name. So SQL Demo Monkey. And I have, I called it DBAs. I'm going to only allow them to browse. I'm not going to let them publish or do content management. And it accepted it. It does go and check. If I were to put DDD and browser, it's not going, is it going to take that? It's not supposed to. Oh, it's trying to go to and try and validate the DDD user, and it's not going to find it. And there, we got an error. It wasn't able to find that user. Yay. So now we can see that anybody in the DBA group has access to this report. This report to parent security, if I were to click this, it's going to remove any individual security settings I've set up for the report. So now it's back to the settings that belong to home, because home was set as the parent to SSRS 101. But I can go ahead and hit edit item security and add the DBAs back in. Okay, so now we've got our permissions all set up. Let's go through the slides to get to the next slide. And we talked about that. Okay, so we have a report. It is running. All I have to do is go to my folder. Let's go SSRS. Let's go back in there and run it, and away we go. Yay, we have a report. But my manager wants to get this report in an email, or for regulatory reasons, I need to save a copy every day of this particular report. So now we're going to set up subscriptions. When you set up subscriptions, you have several things that you need to know up front. Who is going to receive it? It can be an individual, it can be a group of people, it can be a folder. How is it going to be exported? Is it going to be an HTML link, PDF, Excel? There are plugins you can get. You could have it exported to PowerPoint. That's a plugin that you'd have to purchase. How do you want to deliver it? Email, or do you want to store it in a folder? What schedule do you want? Do you want it to be done daily? Do you want it to be done hourly? It's up to you. And finally, there is one other thing that is available with subscriptions, and that is not a data-drive subscription. That's a type of a data-driven subscription. Unfortunately, that's only available in Enterprise. The great thing about data-driven subscriptions is you could set up a whole bunch of people to receive a particular report with the parameters each individual person wants and the export type that each individual person wants. And I've used it, and it's wonderful. But we're not going to talk about that feature in this class. So let's go set up a subscription. I'm going to go back to my folder. I'm going to go to pull-down menu. I'm going to go to Manage. I'm going to go to Subscriptions. This will list all of the subscriptions that are available for me. The new data-driven subscription was the one I was talking about a minute ago, but we're going to create a standard subscription. If you have email available to your report server, you'll have email available here to select. And I don't have email set up, or I would show you that. It will walk you through the steps of picking who the email will be sent to, who is it from, what's the subject, and then finally the schedule. We're going to create a file version. It's going to ask me what do I want the file name to be, and add an extension if it exists already. Or sorry, this is the file extension. Where do I want to put this? It has to use a UNC path. I created a share on my folder, so we're going to drop it into this folder, and it's going to show you the selected formats that are available. Now these are the ones that are available to me. You can purchase additional ones. You can also modify a file for a reporting server to limit what it can be exported to. Maybe you're only allowed to export to PDF, so you can limit that list. Unfortunately, it affects all reports that on the server. It's not just specific to a particular one. We also need to put the credentials to the path. So for me, that is SQL Demo Monkey, administrator, and my password. I'm going to put my password in. I'm going to have to put it in again in a second because we're going to go to another screen. I don't want it to overwrite, so I want it to increment the files when there's new versions. And now I'm going to select a schedule. If you have, you can create shared schedules, and I don't have any set up, so it's not available to me. But I want this one to be ran in 4 minutes. So I'm going to say select today and 10 o'clock, and we'll say 10:30. So in 3 minutes, it's AM. And I can set up any of this information, and then I can go ahead and hit OK, and in 3 minutes from now it's going to run. Because I went to that other screen, I have to put my password in again. Here it allows me to select parameters, so I'm going to change this to tempdb, and I'm going to hit OK, and now I have a subscription set up. While we're waiting, because we have 2 minutes to wait, let's look at this other folder, this other one that I set up yesterday, and let's look at its subscription list. When I go to Manage Subscriptions, it tells me the state of the last one that ran. This one failed, and so it shows me the failure, and this one failed as well, not sure why. Both file share wasn't available. The password was wrong. This one failed, I think, because there's a parenthesis right there. So let's go to my folder, and this is where to be deployed. For those of you that are waiting or can't wait too much longer, this was one that I generated yesterday, and this is what it looks like. I did a chart in the one I did yesterday, and I had everything displayed. So we'll see if we get one more file in here. We've got 1 more minute to wait. So let's go back to our screen. Nope, that's not what I want. I want my presentation. There we go. Some best practices for subscriptions. When you create a brand new report, You could gather the information about subscriptions, but don't set them up and try and not get them set up for a couple weeks, because sometimes you deploy a brand new report and there's some changes. Sometimes the changes are to the subscription, and that way you can work those kinks out before you actually set your subscription out. Create shared schedules and leverage them. They're a wonderful thing. Maybe you have all your reports generate at 3 in the morning. Create a report to manage your subscriptions. That way you can find out what all the parameters are set, how many are set up. All that information is available in the report server database. Also, don't forget to turn subscriptions off for users who have left the company. Otherwise, you are using resources that you don't need to use. So, we went through a lot. We started with an empty project and we went all the way to the end to creating a subscription. We talked about permissions, deployments, various layouts, some controls, and parameters. So now you can create a report from scratch. So why don't we take a couple questions while we wait for that folder to pop up with an element, with the file.
Actually, Mickey,
Yeah.
we're probably going to have to send you the questions. There's probably around 40-something. And
wow.
yes, there's a bunch. And maybe you can blog about them and answer them specifically. What I can do is after the meetings, I can generate the questions and the users, so you can work with them specifically if we need to. Or do it in a blog post, and you just be sure and give me all your information, and I'll be sure people can get to your site. So we can wait until this one if we're just about finished.
Yes.
Because we want to see that. This has been great, by the way, because I didn't really know a lot about SSRS, but we have to manage it, and it was here before I got here, and this will allow me to get in and work with it a little bit, and maybe my boss will probably have me generating some reports to monitor some of our servers. So
yeah, it's wonderful to do that. And using Glenn's queries is a great way to do it. There are some reports that already exist in SSMS, and they're reporting services reports that you have access to. I talk about the templates and how to get metrics on your reports in a presentation available on the Pragmatic Works site. It is a free presentation to watch. So this second link down here at the bottom is that presentation. I also have a presentation on more advanced features for the Tablex controls, so you can take a look at that. You can go get Glenn's diagnostic queries by following this link or simply Googling Glenn Berry diagnostic queries. I also have a book that I co-wrote on writing reports. It is a beginning level book. And you can find my blog at mickeystuewe.com. I will wrap this presentation up and give it to Steve, and I will also put it on my resources page. If you do go to PASS, I will be teaching a more advanced class on reporting services techniques, and so I'd love to have you in my class as well. Let's see if that file got generated. I may not have put the right time on there. No, it didn't get generated. I probably set the subscription up incorrectly. You always have to, when you do it for 3 minutes in the future, sometimes you miss the window, and sometimes I select the wrong day. So I did 10:30 a.m. Oh, today is Tuesday, that's why. 34. Oh, I missed it. Okay. You'll have to believe me that this time subscription does generate one, because I'm gonna let you go. Let me put that slide back up there. And we are all done. Thank you for everybody that stayed late. I apologize that it took longer. This was the first time that I've done an intro class, and I know some areas that I can tighten up. Thank you.
This is great though, because this has got just pretty well everything. It's like a Pluralsight course. I'm going to go back and really dig into it. Anyway, our next session will be August the 8th or August the 4th. I don't know exactly the details yet, but as far as I've been telling everybody to try to use our code. A lot of other chapters are doing the same thing. For every 10 uses, we get a free pass or a free registration to pass, which is worth quite a bit. And so far we have 2 of them, so we'll probably be giving one away in the near future, so people will have time to plan. But we don't know all the details yet, and we'll probably be giving the second one away shortly thereafter, and maybe we can get a third one. So for any VC, if you want to save $150, go ahead and do that, and we'll see you next month. Thank you, Mickey.
Yeah, you're welcome. Take care, everybody.
Bye.